Everyone, I'm Shelby Sauce. I work here at iHeart Radio for intern John and your morning show. We're based here out of DC and also we're on in Baltimore. And yeah, so pretend we're in a movie theater because we are going to be live streaming. So we don't want your phones going off and, pay attention because that's why you're here. But also, it's just a little disruptive and we're live streaming. So we don't want if you're my father, an inappropriate ringtone, going off. So we don't need that. All right, it's 2:30. Are we going to start? Sick. All right, cool. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's show. We're jumping into something that can be a little bit awkward, right? And we're going to be talking openly about relationships, sexual health with your partners, because 85% of young adults want to talk more openly about sexual health and relationship topics with their partners. Yet, over half of young adults say that they're anxious doing so. Many are avoiding these convos altogether because many barriers get in the way, like hurting your partner's feelings or getting rejected. That's where Own the Awk come in. It's a new multimedia campaign launching today that's all about embracing those awkward moments and turning them into opportunities for deeper conversations and for deeper connections. So at owntheawk.org, so that's all in your pamphlets and everything, you'll find on the website tools like videos, conversation starters, digital card decks, and more that can help turn the awk into a real life actual conversation. Okay, so today we're going to be diving into two relationship topics that we know are top of mind and can be challenging to talk about. So defining the relationship and sexual desires. So a lot of these conversations, many of us want to have, but let's be real, they do make us break a sweat. I know that if you're present with us and not on the live, when you got here, you actually filled out some of these cards and maybe even filling them out here with your peers. It may have made you break a sweat, because even talking about it right now, I'm like, maybe breaking a sweat a little bit, but we actually had them right here. So when it comes to sharing your sexual desires, some of you, somebody said sweaty. I get it. Another person said in control. I love that. And then another person said sharing my sexual desires makes me feel like I'm living my best life. 2025, let's go. And then the other cards that we had you fill out are how you feel when it comes to defining the relationship. I don't know if any of you are single right now in 2025, but defining the relationship is like winning the Olympic gold at this point. I'm telling you, I've been single for a hot minute, and when we get there, it's like, thank God. But someone said defining the relationship makes me feel self-conscious. And another person said it makes me feel scared, but it's a necessary step, which, yeah. So I love that we got to read those, and we're going to continue with why these fine people are up here with me. So I'm really excited today to be joined by Shadeen Francis, a marriage, family, and sex therapist, and then two members of the campaign's Young Adult Advisory Group. So we have Kaden Young at the end, and then we have Tara Jones, who will draw upon their lived experiences and knowledge to help us overcome the awk in our love lives and tackle these topics head on. So we're going to keep things fun, maybe a little bit spicy, and we'll be featuring some real life scenarios and pulling some juicy questions from the Own the Awk card deck. So I have these decks right here, but we're just gonna hold on because I'm gonna let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves. So Shadeen, we'll start with you.
Hi, everybody. I am so glad to be here. My name is Shadeen Francis. I am your resident Canadian for the afternoon. I've been here for all of my adult professional life as a sex and relationship therapist. And this conversation, I'm really excited that we get to have this together today. This isn't quite free therapy, but it probably is going to be pretty close as we continue to have this conversation. When I usually have this conversation with folks, it is on the other side of an office, and we're going deep into your history and your love life, so I'm not going to be asking you about your mom. But we are going to be talking some more about where this comes from, because even though this can feel really awkward, for most people, you're having the conversation somewhere, right? With your friends or maybe in your journal, but being able to have it here changes things for people. So I'm so glad you're here in person or on the live stream or in Tomorrowland. And I am looking forward to talking with both of you as well.
Awesome. My name is Tara Michaela Jones. I'm 25 and based in Philadelphia. I started out as a freelance sex educator in college, which for me meant a lot of content creation and writing for different publications and really just trying to supplement whatever people didn't get in grade school sex ed, which is a lot. And then upon graduating, I started a nonprofit. We work with high schoolers across North America digitally to provide comprehensive sex ed, the idea being that they can become their own community's sexual health expert. And I've also been a part of the Young Adult Advisory Group with the National Coalition for Sexual Health for about a year, I think. So it's been really cool watching this campaign come to fruition. And I'm really excited to be here today.
Hey, y'all. My name is Caden Love. I'm 25. I'm from Mississippi originally. I'm still there now, and I've been in community organizing work for about 10, going on 11 years, and been in the reproductive justice and gender space for about 7 years. And I've been with this program for 3 years. I'm one of the OGs who kind of helped usher in this program. So seeing it come to fruition and be launched in this way is very, very exciting for me. And I'm a psych major, so just getting into gender, sexuality, and also the intentionality between, as it pertains to our relationships, is something that's really, really important to me. So I'm just excited to be having the conversation and being on a panel with people as accomplished as these folks here. So thank you all.
You guys sound so much smarter than me. No, seriously, thank you for being here. We are so excited to hear everything once we get into the more conversational parts of everything, which we're actually about to do. So we're going to loosen things up a little bit. We're going to have an icebreaker, and I've got my own, or we've got our own, because it's actually on the website, and I believe in your pamphlets if you're physically here. If you're online, just go to the website. But we've got our Own the Awk card deck ready to go. So on this one, it is a hot take. So red flag or green flag, talking about exes. You guys have to answer. Just go for it. I trust y'all to start talking.
I would say that it can be both, and it really depends on who you are and who your partner is. But I do think the smartest way to go about it is talking about whether or not it feels like a red or green flag to you in that specific relationship. So for me, I know that I tend to compare myself to other people, whether it's career-wise or appearance-wise, and I just know that that's a thing that I've struggled with, and knowing that about myself, that impacts whether or not in a relationship I feel good about talking about exes. I didn't even really know it was an option not to until I had a friend who was in a relationship where she decided to never ask about that person's ex, and they decided together that they were just not going to talk about exes, and it really worked out for her. So I feel like it's really dependent on who you are, who your partner is, and just knowing yourself and having those conversations beforehand.
Yeah, I would say green flag, because I like to know what I'm getting into.
Yeah.
So, I love, what happened in your last relationship. How have you grown? What did you learn from your previous relationships? Because I think that informs me about maybe what steps you're taking to better yourself. And also whether or not I should stay here, to be honest.
Exactly.
Like, I was dating this girl once, and we were just going out. I walked her back to her car. It was very Southern gentleman of me. And she was like, my boyfriend never does things like this. And I was like, your boyfriend? And she was like, I met my ex. And I was like, I'm not. I'm not in a space where I want to deal with that right now.
Yeah.
So anything that can help me navigate the relationship with more clarity is something that I consider to be a green flag.
Yeah, I hear you on both of those points, right? The nuance of, okay, how do I feel about hearing information, and also what kind of information do I want? I'm going to lean into it as a therapist, I want to be like, oh, it's nuanced, right? But for the sake of the game, I'm going to go with green. I'm going to go with green flag. It is important, though, to consider what about our exes are we talking about?
That's a good point,
what information are we actually sharing, and how?
Yeah.
What I most am curious about is, what have you learned from the relationships that you've been a part of? Whether it was a great relationship or not, what are you taking away that's going to improve who you are and how you show up at present? Mm-hmm. If all you have to say is, well, my ex was censored, right? that doesn't give me much of anything, although it is useful information to your point, Kaden, around letting me know more about who you are and maybe where you are on your sort of recovery journey from past experiences. But I do also err on the side of liking more information.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't disagree with any of you. I'm just here to moderate. I'm not a therapist, so. So now we're gonna get into a scenario. So we are talking about defining the relationship, and maybe if you're single, again, I've been single since, I feel like the pandemic, for at least me, really changed dating, because it just got really weird, in my opinion, with dating apps. And I literally deleted Bumble this morning, so I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'll hang out in the grocery store and find somebody at this point. But we're gonna do a little scenario, okay? So maybe you can relate to this. Ahmed and Lewis have been seeing each other for a few months, regular date nights, sleepovers, meeting each other's friends. One night, while cuddling and watching a movie, Lewis snaps a quick selfie, and before he can post it, Ahmed blurts out, quote, "You're not posting that right, crop me out," unquote. Lewis laughs, reassuring Ahmed that he looks great, but Ahmed shakes his head and says, quote, "No, I'm really not ready for you to post that about us," unquote. Lewis is caught off guard, confused, and hurt by Ahmed's reaction, leaving Lewis to wonder, what are we and where do we stand? So many people have been in Lewis's position, feeling ready to officially launch that relationship, while other people might not be on the same page. So why do you think it's so hard and scary for people to DTR, or if you don't know what DTR is, define the relationship?
I mean, one person had already talked about their experience, or maybe it was two, talking about how self-conscious it can make you feel to put a title on something. And in the context of my work with folks, part of why that is, it's really vulnerable to tell someone else what you want. It's important to be really clear, but it can feel really awkward. And to be, a little bit gendered about this for a second, women in particular are typically given the message, not only is it kind of your responsibility to define the relationship, but also in every other space, you're expected to be really passive and polite and go with the flow about your desires. So the conflict there can make it really challenging. And so I know in this context, these two people are sort of going off of maybe assumptions about where they are or aren't, and trying to figure out, okay, well, what are the next steps, or what is appropriate? And these are really good opportunities for folks to start maybe being a little bit curious around, like, oh, what does posting mean, to you or to us, right? And what would be a good time or a good way to do that for the first time?
Yeah, I definitely echo everything Shadeen said, but I also think it's a fear of accountability. Like, when you create those boundaries and those structures within a relationship, you're held to those. And I think a lot of people, especially men in a lot of systems, use kind of this gray area as a way to be like, oh, I wasn't your man, so none of these things matter, right? You never said that me engaging with this person was something that was going to be a problem. Therefore, you can't be mad at me, or I have some level of control over the situation. And so I do think there is a fear of accountability that takes place as well. But also I think a general fear of, if I put these boundaries in place, am I going to lose this person that I have a sexual or romantic relationship with? And that fear can stop folks from maybe even exploring what a healthy relationship would look like for them, at least in my experience.
I think accountability is a really interesting point. I also think when we're talking about vulnerability, a lot of what we're talking about is like power. And I think that there are so many ways that we're told by society, especially in the context of relationships, that you're supposed to value your power over that emotional vulnerability. Like, we have terms like winning the breakup, or everybody just wants to be like nonchalant. Nobody wants to chalant anymore. So it's like, you're meant to feel in so many ways like you're not supposed to bring that vulnerability and be too much and ask, what are we? Because that might expose what you actually want and how you actually feel.
Yeah, literally, I get it. And now, like, we celebrate like the no contact with like birthday cakes. Like, you did no contact for a month, but it's like we have to be like emotional to define the relationship. It's like, oh no. Just a blob. Anyway, so what's a good way to start a conversation about relationship expectations without making it feel like a high pressure moment?
I try to do it in the beginning, as early as possible, just so you know what I'm going into, and like you can consent to like whatever this relationship looks like. Because I love me a gray area. You know, I don't always want to be somebody's boyfriend.
Sorry. I get it.
I don't.
Yeah.
But also, even in the gray area, you have to set boundaries. Are you cool with me having other partners? What does that look like? You know, communication-wise, how do you want to be communicated to? These are all ways that even if you're not in a defined boyfriend, girlfriend, partner relationship, that you can establish boundaries and do it consistently. Like if I know I'm not going for a long-term relationship, I let you know that very, very early on. And if the conversation comes after that, because sometimes it happens, allowing for it to come in like naturally and opening up with a question like, how do you feel about where we are right now? As opposed to just going with the generic, what are we? Because that's always kind of awkward. It's like, how are you feeling about what we're doing? And then using that as a way to like open up if you're not feeling fulfilled in the relationship or in that space.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, especially as a person who is very chalant. You know, this whole idea of what are we is really passive. And while it can feel powerful to sort of take sort of a step back and facilitate a conversation, it doesn't actually mean that your needs or your desires ever really get on the table, especially if the person doesn't think to ask you back, well, how are you feeling about this? And so thinking about a time or a place where you're feeling comfortable, whatever that might mean to you, to share, right? If you're in a moment, especially moments that feel good, I like having conversations when things are good.
Yeah.
Right? We're enjoying each other, and you just say, I'm really liking spending time with you. And if there's a request, like, I'd like to spend some more time with you, right? Like you can say that, and it's a natural extension of this moment that we're sharing together, rather than having to like sit down over a serious dinner and be like, so how are you feeling about, right? Like I can do that because I'm a therapist, but maybe that's not the way you would like to engage. And for everyone, it's going to be different, but check in around what your own tone is and see if you're willing to offer as a way to start.
Yeah, I think building off what Shadeen was saying, you have to remember that there are certain circumstances and contexts where it's really okay to put yourself first, especially when the thing that you're putting yourself before is somebody else's idea of you or what you think that somebody else thinks of you. It's okay to value your own emotional safety over that. And so I think holding that central when you're having that conversation, as well as like just knowing that it is the mature and healthy thing to do to look out for yourself in that way. And so those conversations might not always be easy, but that's not really the point. It's that they're important. So I think when you keep that in the center of your mind, at the top of your mind, that's where those conversations start to happen.
I love all of your answers. So going off of that, so this guy I dated, we had the conversation when things weren't amazing, right? You know, something happens, then you end up having like, but okay, then what are we conversation, right? So what if you're not on the same page? What then?
I think it depends on what you want.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to encourage people to, and this has come up a few times, so I love that we're really reinforcing this, to check in on like what your instincts or your gut or your emotional reaction is. I think we can do the whole sort of theoretical thing, and we like go through all the TikTok therapy that we've had and all of the books that we've read around like how we're supposed to do the thing, but you also have like a felt sense. And even if that doesn't give you the clear action steps, it does give you the direction to go in. And so if you're in a negotiation and the terms are feeling really difficult and you're just getting a lot of no, maybe you follow the no or even announce that. Like, this doesn't feel like it's working, right? And if there's still some yes in there, to see how much yes we can pull. So if there are ways in which we're still aligned, can we use that to help us move forward? Okay, so we're struggling to figure out, do we see other people, but we both are really clear that we do want to spend more time together. Well, what would allow us to spend more time together in a way that still feels good? And often we can move forward from there.
I'll also say my advice on what not to do, especially if you are the person who is seeking a relationship or exclusivity, is to stick around hoping that you can convince somebody. I think that is something that I used to do when I was younger, and I saw it not work out enough times that I stopped, and it has brought so much peace to my life. And every now and again, I'll see people on social media who have these beautiful, wonderful relationships that came out of what was supposed to be a friends with benefits situation. And I'll think to myself, oh, maybe there was, that guy who said that he didn't want a relationship, but if I had just stuck around, I could have convinced him. And then I just have to remember that that's got about a 99% fail rate. So it is really for the best to take people at their word. And again, protect your own heart. There are so many fish in the sea. There are probably like too many fish in the sea nowadays with dating apps.
Yeah.
Which I think is a whole nother problem within itself. But at least it gives you some peace of mind, hopefully, knowing that you can have your expectations met and you can have your needs met, and you don't need to wait around hoping that somebody sees that they want a relationship with you when they're telling you that they don't.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it requires a degree of like self-interrogation and self-reflection to like figure out what are my needs right now, and also what am I willing to actually compromise on. And compromising is hard, and it's difficult to define for yourself. Like, I know a lot of monogamous homegirls who have like tried out polyamory for a man, and it never works out, right? Because that wasn't something that you wanted to do, but you wanted to salvage this relationship, right? And so you really do have to sit and think about like what you like, what you don't like. And that's part of why like relationships, at least for me, 18 to 20 were the trenches, because I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what I was willing to compromise on, and I really had to work through a lot of those things in those relationships. And so just thinking about what you want, what you don't want, and trying not to make decisions out of fear of losing a relationship, out of fear of being alone. Make more active decisions that you know will benefit yourself when you have the opportunity to.
Thank you. That was really good. I feel like we're killing it with these scenarios, so I'm just going to give you another one, actually. So Jesse and Alex are making ice cream sundaes together. Alex sticks with his usual vanilla, keeping it simple, basic, while Jesse's is more creative, piling on toppings. As they build their sundaes, Jesse thinks it's the perfect time to bring up her desire to spice things up in their sex life. She tries to compare it to ice cream, adding more toppings to make the conversation easier for her, but Alex is not picking up on the hints. Now Jessie's stuck and frustrated. She wants to express what she's into, but she doesn't know how to without making things awkward. She's wondering how is she going to get her point across and communicate more directly about her sexual needs and desires with Alex? So do you guys want to answer that question? And then there's also some more that kind of follow that, though. So does anyone want to take that, this whole scenario, how she can better, sorry, I already changed the page, how she can get her point across for her sexual desires, or the other question is, what are the benefits of talking openly about what you like and don't like, and not just saying vanilla ice cream?
Yeah, I think being more direct works. One, because I know me, I wouldn't have got the message. I love me some ice cream and sprinkles, and she would have tried to bring that up, and I wouldn't have known what she was talking about because I'm trying to eat this ice cream. So, yeah, being more direct in general, and also understanding that pleasure is something that you deserve, right? This is something that you're coming into the relationship looking to achieve. And standing on that and kind of building up that level of confidence that your pleasure is something that should be centered within this relationship and is worthy of being brought up. So I would definitely give that advice. Like, just say it plainly, or create a safe space for yourself in which you can say it plainly. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely wholeheartedly agree that it is better to just be direct as possible. But I'll kind of circle back to something I was trying to say before, which is that when it comes to sexual communication, a lot of the time it's not easy, especially as somebody who has a lot of social anxiety. So I can totally wrap my head around why those conversations are hard, because they're hard for me too. And I felt like for the longest time as a sex educator, I was seeing all of these people insist that sexual communication was easy when it really wasn't for me. And I talk about sex for a living. And so I started coming up with all of these different techniques to kind of make it a little bit easier for me. deciding in advance when I want to, initiate these conversations and how, and trying to avoid specific questions where the answer could give me some sort of panic attack or anxiety. But I also think that regardless of what you do, it's probably not going to be easy for most people. It's more so important. So just holding that really at the top of your mind.
Yeah, I think to bridge part of what both of you said, and Tara, you came back to this point that I wanna amplify. We get really in our heads about things not being awkward, and sometimes that's not the point of the moment. I mean, first and foremost, if this is new, like if you don't go around making sexual innuendos out of your desserts, you're probably just not going to be very good at it for the first time. You're right. Your commitment in the moment doesn't need to be like, oh, how sexy is this, or making sure it's not awkward. Most things are awkward if they're unpracticed. Anyone here ever meet a baby before? Anyone see a baby?
Yeah.
They're very awkward creatures. Eating, awkward. Walking, awkward. Talking, not great, right? And you get better with practice, but we don't allow ourselves to be that in our sexual lives. We're supposed to just like magically just come fully formed and sexual and have these well-scripted dialogues, And so being direct is really useful. And if direct isn't your style, take some time to practice. If you have something that you're trying to communicate, try it out first. If you know what you're trying to say and you need a little bit more confidence to be able to get there, script it out. Take it to the group chat. I know you have one, right? Like, what does this sound like to you? How might they respond? Play out some banter with someone who's good at this. You probably have a friend who's good at this, who's practiced this, right? But being able to also find some inspiration to say what you need to say, and you don't have to be committed to it not being awkward because you're already in a relationship with a person who's probably really interested in pleasing you, right? That for most of us who are in partnerships, we want to be having a good time together. And so to be able to focus on that rather than making sure this moment isn't awkward. And this moment is about letting someone know that you want to have more sprinkles on your ice cream.
I love that. I'm gonna be honest. This one is kind of similar, but I loved what Tara said. How you already have scenarios like to help you, or tools to help you walk through the awkward. So maybe you could start, because the next question is, what are some tips for owning the awk and reducing anxiety when talking about pressure? While not making your partner feel uncomfortable or pressured?
Yeah. So I talked a little bit about deciding beforehand and really making that commitment to yourself about, do I want to have this conversation before sex? Do I want to have this conversation during sex? Because people do talk during sex. You might not see it in porn. But do I want to have this conversation, after sex? And so having that kind of agreement for yourself with yourself can be a good step. And I also think what Shadeen was saying about practice really makes perfect. Maybe not perfect, but practice certainly makes better. And then I also think, you can show instead of tell, or show in addition to tell, probably, because it really is best to use your words. But you can demonstrate to your partner something that you'd like to have done, or you can even demonstrate through watching porn together, something that you'd enjoy. So those are some tips that come to mind for me.
I like a yes and as a toolkit option. So quite often there isn't something that is happening that is wrong. It's just not all the way. Vanilla is a solid base, right? Many of the things that we enjoy, the flavors that we enjoy, it's probably a vanilla base with some more stuff. And so it can be less awkward of a jump to get to the more by also acknowledging what is good now and adding to it. But also letting your partner know, maybe in advance or as you're getting into it, that that's the conversation you're trying to have. Right? Sometimes the thing that makes it awkward is you're not getting the response or like the receptivity, and then you're left feeling like, did did I say something weird? Did you hear me? Should I say it again? Right? That also checking in, like, is this a good time to talk about that? Right? And that can help things feel a little less awkward because now there's someone helping the conversation move forward.
Yeah, I definitely echo what you two said. I think it's just important to realize or recognize the relationships are containers, right? You're building trust and you're also building a safe space for yourself. And so taking your time, I know that for me, I tend to be in very sex positive relationships. And so it's very top of mind when we enter into the space, what this is going to be, what we would like for it to look like. But for everyone, that isn't the case. So taking time, I think about what Tara said, what are the conditions that you need in order to feel safe in these spaces and having these conversations, and doing that, and also practicing bringing it up, and also maybe just infusing it into something that you enjoy doing. If you and your partner enjoy watching television or porn, using those opportunities to kind of bring things up, maybe organically. But yeah, just really working on it yourself within your relationship as you build trust.
Thank you. So the next question is, what if my partner is offended by the topic that I bring up? And the example given is like they say, you think I'm not good in bed. How do you handle that kind of situation?
I'm a listener personally. And so whenever those scenarios have popped up, it's trying to get to the core of what the issue is. I think often in our society, I'm from the South, and so a lot of our work is, one, breaking down kind of sex negativity in general, and also the ways in which we try to aspire towards hegemonic or traditional masculinity and femininity. And so thinking about, okay, what's the core of this thing? Is this a pride thing? Is this a you don't want to be viewed in a particular kind of way thing? So that we can have maybe a more generative conversation around maybe what that is, and also maybe recognizing if maybe this is just an impasse. This isn't something that you want to do, don't enjoy doing, and you have your reasons for that, and maybe figuring out if this relationship is something that's going to work for me or not. And if it's not, understanding that that's okay, and that there are ways to navigate those spaces that are healthy and won't necessarily burn a bridge all the time.
Yeah, I think unpacking is a huge part of really resolving an issue if a partner were to take offense to this conversation, because that could be coming from anything from, their own self-image to the way that you phrased something and whether or not that could be rephrased in a less hurtful way. So I think that if that person does take offense, that is a conversation within itself around where is that rooted, and where can you maybe both kind of meet in the middle and have the conversation in a different way.
Yeah, what sticks out to me is that in their taking offense, what they heard was that you think I'm bad in bed. And so that's a communication of fear and shame, right? I am worried about what you think of me, but also I am already feeling like you think I am bad. And so being able to slow down the conversation some and to unpack and check in a non-judgmental way if you have capacity for it, because I also want to acknowledge that receiving that when you've done a really vulnerable share, especially when it's like a request for a different kind of connection or more sexual pleasure, you will also feel that. So I want to have empathy for that too. And if you have capacity in the moment to slow the conversation down, to check in and I'm going to use this word in a non-judgmental way, but correct the interpretation that they're taking. If that's not what you're trying to express, sometimes you're kind of saying that, right? That maybe you didn't say it, but however, sometimes the feedback is like, this is not good. We need to change it. And so I want to be honest about that. But it is not about who they are, and often it's not about how they're performing, but it is about your needs or desires. And so being able to correct some of that. Hey, no, that's actually not what I'm saying. I'm saying I want more pleasure with you. And again, if we were doing the yes and, like I like vanilla and I would like to put some brownie chunks in it, right? That we can often move through some of those like, oh no, are you judging me? Have you been quietly hating this? Especially if we don't typically have these conversations, those first ones can be really daunting around like, whoa, why are we talking about this? And so being able to be gentle with someone else's shame is also a really beautiful container to create in a relationship, because you would want them to do the same for you. You would want them to reassure you in the times when you're feeling self-conscious, when you're getting feedback.
Okay, so going off of that, what are some ways to make safer sex part of an ongoing convo, but not just a one-time thing?
Yeah, I mean, for each person, it depends on what your safer sex practices are. I'm a condom queen. Love them. Always have them, ready for them. And so if I were to be starting a relationship with someone, I would let them know that, because it's just not a thing that I'm super flexible about, but also I'm not self-conscious about it. I would love for people to not be self-conscious about the things that are good to them or for them and that make you feel safe and comfortable. There's nothing to be ashamed of there, even if it's different than how the other person might be navigating their own body. And so, yeah, early on is great. And I would encourage people to introduce it as not a big deal. Because it's probably not a big deal unless you make it a big deal, or allow it to become a big deal if it is a big deal. Let's not start there. If this is just you, let it just be you.
Yeah, and I also encourage like a level of openness in figuring out what safe sex option works best for you. Yeah, in doing reproductive justice work, there are like a million different kinds of condoms, and sometimes they can be fun. They got like banana flavored kinds, you know what I'm saying? They got different kinds of skin types, right? Dental dams, female condoms, all kinds of different ways in which you can engage with sex safely in different ways. And being open to figuring out what works for you. Not every birth control method or safe sex method is comfortable for everyone. But understanding that safe sex is something that is important and something that a lot of relationships value. So having that openness and being flexible enough to just talk openly about what works for you, what doesn't work, and maybe just experimenting with different things.
Yeah, I will start by saying that the reason that a lot of people use the terminology safer sex as opposed to safe sex is because virtually all acts that we consider sexual carry some level of risk. And so the safer piece is about your own comfort with risk as an individual, which is different for everyone, and has a lot to do with your knowledge of your own sexual health, but also your knowledge about sexual health generally. Most of us don't get that education. And so I think understanding and acknowledging that at the outset is a huge, huge part of the conversation. And then I think it's a lot of the themes that we've already talked about in terms of like communication isn't always easy, but it's important, but also in terms of like it's okay to put yourself first in a lot of situations when it comes to sex and relationships and putting your own health first. Physical health is certainly, you know, an area where you should be prioritizing yourself.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to another one of our cards. Again, if you have the pamphlets, these are in there. And also, if you're watching virtually, these are on the website as well. So I'm going to hand this to Shadeen, and she's actually going to start with it.
Sure. So this question is, do you have any deal breakers regarding sex, our relationship, or both? Now, one thing that really stands out to me for the deck is that it can make it less awkward to have some of these conversations, right? That in the same way that you might be like, well, I overheard on this TV show, or my therapist said blah, 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 and you use that as sort of a way in to talk about a thing, to play like a conversation game. I think it's a game, but again, you know what I do for work. But being able to have a reason to be talking about this rather than waiting for the right moment can be a really good invitation. And I'm curious, you know, for the two of you, as we sort of demo like pulling these card decks, like what that would be like for the two of you in a relationship.
You mean like playing the game?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I like that question, but I also like prompted ways to communicate with a partner. And I think it does kind of, if you are somebody who has some social anxiety, open a conversation that you might not know how to open otherwise. And then I would say in regards to this question in particular, that I have a lot of deal breakers. At some point, I like started a whole political questionnaire that I would give to people that I was considering even going on a first date with, because there ain't no way that I'm going out with somebody who thinks a lot of the things that I see people thinking. So it's a really long list, and if you ever want that questionnaire, hit me up because it's got some great questions on it.
Yeah, listen, I was just about to say that. Yeah, I might need a copy of that questionnaire. That'll help a lot. But also, I think for me, one, like I said, as someone who tries to move with sex positivity, I love me a good game. And I love cards as like a way to engage in conversation. Like even just simple card games. You get a spades game going, a lot of conversations are going to happen. We're going to be arguing, right? And so bringing fun into it in a very organic way is really, really dope. And so, yeah, I could definitely see myself using that in a lot of different contexts, not just in the beginning of a relationship, but also kind of as we're navigating. If some of these questions, your answers have changed to some of them, yeah, it just seems cool. So
I also like them as self-reflection opportunities. You don't have to wait for you to be in a relationship to be thinking about what your deal breakers are. It's a really great question to be asking even before you start engaging with someone, so that you're not 12 dates deep and then you make a list and you're like, oh no, right? That you can sit and reflect on these and prompt yourself and be curious about your own self. Date yourself a little bit so that you know also what you're seeking to attract and who you would be a good fit for and who would be a good fit for you.
And just a reminder, so the giant cards that we have up here, I know I said they're in your pamphlet and you can get them online, but they have these cards at owntheawk.org, and like Shadeen said, you can use them with your partner, by yourself, help you understand your specific needs, likes, dislikes, all that good stuff. So we are running out of time a little bit, so to close, could each of you give me one piece of closing advice, brief little nugget, takeaway that I'll think about before I go to sleep tonight? Maybe.
I think for me, if I want to leave something with people, it's listen intently. I think a lot of this was about like self-ownership and being very proud of your own sexuality and creating your own boundaries. But on the other end, being willing to listen to other people in order to absorb what their needs are, right? We're creating a container within these relationships, and both people's pleasure is important. So listen intently and communicate clearly would be my advice.
I would say just that this is lifelong work. I think especially as a sexuality professional, I feel like I could learn about sex every day and still have more to learn about all there is to human sexuality. And then even in the context of my own relationships as a girl with attachment issues, there's a lot of work that is just prolonged work, and it's going to be my work to do in order to have healthy relationships, in order to have pleasure in my life, and so really like accepting that and doing the work and finding outlets to learn is, I think, a really important part of being a sexual being and being in relationships.
Yeah, I want to remind us that also, like, this is supposed to be fun, right? We're talking about sex, we're talking about relationships, we're talking about pleasure. And so I know that we're acknowledging that it can be awkward and uncomfortable. And we're having this conversation because that's normal, right? We're people, so we have feelings and we are practicing in real time. And so as we do this lifelong work and as we learn about our boundaries and listen to one another, also leave room to check in around, ooh, what feels good here, right? How do I want to become? What am I growing into? What would be sexy? What would allow you to enjoy this process some more? I want to just leave us with the reminder, or maybe the invitation or permission to enjoy getting to know people, to enjoy getting to know yourself, and to enjoy trying out saying things in a way you might not have before to see where you might get to.
Thank you. And just a reminder, I know I already gave out the website, but there's tools, resources, everything we talked about here, I know we live streamed it. You can get it on YouTube, but it's all up at owntheawk.org so that you can not only have these conversations with yourself, with your partner, but also with your peers too. I think that's really important. And thank you, Kaden, Tara, Shadeen, for your wisdom, stories, tips. And the conversation does not end here. If you've ever felt awkward talking about sex, relationships, or boundaries, again, Own the Awk, owntheawk.org as well, but Own the Awk in real life too. So the more we talk, the easier it gets. And yeah, again, there's tips, conversation starters, and then you can, I literally just said this, but keep the conversation going with your friends and even your family members and everything. But we will be ending the YouTube live portion. So now our audience gets to talk, and we're gonna have an actual live Q&A, which, yay, you guys are excited, I can tell. I know y'all have so many questions.